Welcome everyone. This is a session on routing and network analysis services using ArcGIS Online. My name is Matt Crowder, and with me is my colleague Dilesh Manloy. And a little bit more about us. We're both members of the Network Analyst development team. I'm a developer, and Dilesh is the lead PE working on the online services. And we have a couple questions for you just to try and understand our audience. So with a show of hands, how many people are current Network Analyst users? Okay, awesome. How many are currently ArcGIS Online users? Same people. How many people are new and just trying to figure out ArcGIS Online and network analysis? Okay, a couple people there too. Awesome. Well, you're in the right place. We have a little bit of something for everyone. What we're going to be covering today is really talking about what the network analysis online services are, and then really some of the out-of-the-box clients and how they can consume those services and how you can find them, what some of the capabilities are. We'll talk a little bit about managing credits, and so you can understand how much the services cost in terms of credits and how you can provide access to them. A couple slides on support links for help and more topics. And then finally, we'll open it up for questions. When we're talking about ArcGIS Online in general, what are those things? It's really the ready-to-use services hosted by Esri in the cloud. So we have some services in Azure, some in Amazon. It doesn't really matter to you. All you know is you can connect online and consume the services that we provide that have mapping, spatial analysis, sharing, collaboration services. In particular today, we'll be talking about the network analysis services that we host that allow you to do transportation problems. Just a heads up for people, you don't need to take pictures of all our slides. At the very end of the presentation, there'll be a link to where you can download all the slides. So take a picture of that one, because that one, you can just get the slides as soon as you leave the session. You can just download them and do whatever you want. So for the network analysis services, we solve some transportation problems. Most of the people in this room were familiar with network analysts, but briefly to go through them, I'll cover them here, and then we'll talk about more of the capabilities later. We do point-to-point routing, where you can either pass in the fixed sequence of the stops to travel, or we can optimize the sequence for you. Closest facility, where you might want to find, you broke your leg and you want to find the closest hospital, or you broke both your legs and you need to find the closest ambulance to come to you. The service area solver, also called the drive time service, where you can say, I'm at this location, or I have these 5 stores. Give me the 10, 15, 20-minute travel time areas that I can travel from that location out. The OD cost matrix service is typical if you have a lot of things you're going from and to, and you want to know from each one of those origins, how long does it take in time and distance to get to all the destinations. This is common for a Rand McNally map, where they have that little table of the cities this way and the cities that way and the travel time and distance. Same concept. Location-Allocation service is used for site selection, where you may have a bunch of customers and demand located over the area, and you want to add maybe 1 or 2 or 3 stores, and you want to place them to best service the need of that community. The vehicle routing problem, where you might have a lot of packages to deliver, or you might be an inspector where you're traveling to a lot of different sites, and you may have so many, you have 10 inspectors and you're traveling to 1,000 different sites, and you want to figure out for each vehicle which location should each travel to and optimize the whole fleet in one fell swoop to optimize the travel time across the organization. And then the traffic service is used for visualizing traffic and incidents and accidents. So what do you need to use the online services? Well, you'll need an online service subscription with credits. You'll also need your analysis inputs. This isn't the network. In fact, you can't use your own network. You're using our network. But the analysis inputs might be your customers, or your stores that you're traveling out from, or the stops you're traveling to. Or you can use some of our base map layers that has demographic data already. Then you'd need an app. You can build your own custom app. We've had other sessions on doing that. And there's a lot of resources online for developing your own application. Today, we'll mostly be talking about some of the out-of-the-box apps that you can use to just call the services directly. What you don't need, because in some cases this is even more important, you don't need a Network Analyst extension. You also don't need your own street data. Both those things come with just using the online service. I find this really powerful because for a lot of people, if they're doing Network Analyst as part of their core business, it makes sense to purchase the street data or collect the street data and get the license. But if your organization is really a GIS-centric shop and network analysis maybe is a piecemeal thing that you're not doing very often, you don't want to invest all that money in the data and the licenses. And instead, you can just call our online service for that ad hoc analysis and get the same capabilities, same performance at a fraction of the overall cost if that's not part of your core business. You also don't need ArcGIS server or hardware to host it or IT to maintain it. So it's a good solution. More about the data. We do have global coverage. There is an asterisk there because the level of coverage and the quality of the data does vary by region. In the map below, you can see that there's a legend that says the coverage per different country. Darker the color typically means better quality data. And what I mean by that is, say for North America, that's that dark green for United States, it has not only speed limits, but it has historical traffic, live data traffic, and predictive traffic up to 12 hours in the future. So you know what the traffic would be, and the analysis will take advantage of that during the drive time analysis to know how far you can actually travel. Other countries have less coverage where they might just have historical traffic. And as you get to the lighter colors, it might even be minimal street coverage where they just have streets between cities and they don't have the actual residential streets. A good example of that that's really important to be aware of is China. Whereas we know that there's a lot of roads in China, but getting those roads and being able to do analysis on those has been challenging for us. So as it is right now, we have minimal coverage in China, but that's probably the one exception of where we don't have really great coverage. For most of the other places, we have not just good data with traffic, but we have other attribution, things like hazmat restrictions, toll roads, walkways, height, weight, length restrictions, things that you can set up for your analysis if you're shipping hazardous materials or different gases, or you're traveling with oversized vehicles and you need to restrict the roads you travel based on those. And then there's a new capability where you can specify how you set those restrictions and settings to make it really easy for users to do analysis using one of those settings. And Dilesh is going to show this later. So how do you access these services? As I first mentioned, you do need to have an online subscription with credits. If you're an ArcGIS Desktop user, you get free credits as part of the subscription. I believe it's 500 credits per year. Or if you're just checking it out and you don't have credits yet, you could get a free account at arcgis.com where you can get 200 credits just to kind of play around with. And if you run out of those credits, get another account and try it again. Ways to access the service. I already mentioned you can use Pro, you can use ArcMap. There's also the directions and analysis tools in the map viewer through arcgis.com. There's also a lot of other apps like Insight, GeoPlanner, Business Analyst, Collector that use it internally, and they get the results and munge in more data like demographic data to get more meaningful results for those specific applications. And then, as I mentioned, there are web and runtime SDKs. There's a link here below. When you get the slides, you can go to that. There's a lot of development labs that can jumpstart you, showing you how you can use REST or JavaScript or Python or other languages to call these services yourself. So we're going to talk about how you can access these really through Pro, ArcMap, and arcgis.com through the map viewer. So within Pro, in general, most of the tools can be accessed one of two ways, or a combination of ways if you choose. One is accessing them through GP services. So in the Pro ribbon, under the Analysis tab, you'll see ready-to-use tools. These are all our geoprocessing, asynchronous online services that you can make a request to it. It'll do the processing and return you back the results as feature layers. The bottom 6 of these are all network analysis tools. So if you're familiar with GP and you like that methodology of accessing services, that's how you might use that. The other way is through the network analysis layer methodology, and that's also under analysis, but it's that number 2 where you click on Network Analyst, and the drop-down shows up, and that bottom item says www.arcgis.com. That's essentially indicating to you that if you create a network analysis layer, it's going to be using the online services to do the actual analysis. But other than that, it works exactly the same way as if you had your own local network data set. You'd use the same tools to create the analysis layer, populate the inputs, make the requests. If you had a local network, it would use that. If you're using online, it just makes the request, gets the results, and populates the analysis layer. So it's pretty seamless to the user if you're using the online services. Dilesh is going to be showing an example of that later. Using the services with ArcMap, from the catalog window, you would connect to your ready-to-use services, go to logistics, and then there's a whole slew of toolboxes, one for each one of those types of analysis that you could run those asynchronous geoprocessing services, or put them in another model to string along a bigger process. You can use the services within the ArcGIS.com map viewer as well. There's the directions widget for doing simple point-to-point routing. And then the analysis tools are kind of spread throughout the different areas of the analysis. I'm highlighting 5 of them right here. Most of them are under user proximity. The closest facility service is under the find locations, and some of the other ones are spread other places. I'm going to show for each one of the analysis where you can find them. And it's important because for the online services in particular, from the map viewer, we renamed things to be more consistent within the analysis package, but they don't always line up with what the solver was called in the historic Network Analyst solution. Another thing about the map viewer is, as we mentioned, you do need to add your inputs in if you're going to perform analysis on that. So we've had questions in the past of, well, how do I get my stops into online so I can then route on them? Or how do I load my hospitals that I want to travel to? So there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can have, if you already have feature services or map services, you can use them. But if you just have a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet, you can click on add layer from file, and then you can use the World Geocoding service to batch geocode those addresses and create points off of those that you can then use for analysis. So I just wanted to identify that. Another bullet point here, it's not really related to adding inputs, but just a caveat that you can't add your own network data set to online and use that. You are using our service in our network. So let's talk a little bit about the capabilities. So for the traffic service, it's really used for visualizing speeds of the roads. Red means it's highly congested, green means it's free flow. And then we also have traffic incidents where we can identify where there's traffic accidents or construction that you may want to avoid. And you can interrogate those and see the severity of that. Typically it's used as a background layer, base map layer, and map. And the data is updated every 5 minutes, so it's always up to date. Using the traffic service within Pro on that left, you go to Portal, and then you can search for the Living Atlas and just search for world traffic, and then you can add that as a base map layer into Pro to just have it as a background so you can visualize the traffic. From the map viewer, same thing, you browse the Living Atlas layers for the world traffic service. And even in ArcMap, you're able to use that map service. Once again, under the ready-to-use services, just go to Traffic, World Traffic, add that dynamic map service to your map, and then you'll see all the traffic and you'll be able to identify the incidents on that. Our next service is the route service. As I mentioned, we can do simple point-to-point routing where you already know the sequence and you just want to know the time to travel to each one of those and get driving directions. Or we can optimize that sequence for you to give you the best overall travel time to get through all of those stops. All of our solvers support traffic, And we do support driving directions in all the languages that ArcGIS Online supports. Using the route service from desktop, in Pro, you go through Network Analyst, and you can choose the route layer to create route analysis layer, or you can use the ready-to-use services. Here it's called Find Routes, and that will find one or more routes as you identify and pass it in. In ArcMap, there's also an old tool called Find Route that you can point that to the ArcGIS.com online service and do point-to-point routing through a simple UI outside of Network Analyst. And doing it that way doesn't require network extension either. Online, there's two ways to generate routes using the map viewer. One is the directions widget, where you click on that, you can just geocode some addresses, type them in. You can either optimize the route or just choose the sequence and get directions. There's also an analysis tool called Connect Origins for Destinations. And this is useful if you maybe have a lot of routes. Maybe for your company, you know where all your employees live and you know where they all work, and you want to just do an analysis to figure out for all your employees what's the travel time from each one of those homes to the office or the offices. So you can pass in multiple routes where you say all the starting locations, all the destinations, and it will just return all those routes back as one. But it's called Connect Origins to Destinations in Online. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Dilesh for a quick demo.
3.
Yep.
Thanks, Matt. So in this demonstration, I'm going to be showing you how you can find routes for, let's say, a trucking company that I work with. For my application, I'm logged into ArcGIS Online. So I'm using the map viewer that comes with ArcGIS.com. I'm signed in with my user to find routes between two locations. In this case, I'll be finding route between Redlands and Riverside here. So I go click on the directions button or get directions, and this opens the direction pane. And here you can specify one or more stops, a travel mode, some other settings, and you can find a route. In this case, I am finding route for my trucks. So I'm going to use trucking time as my travel mode. And then I'm going to enter in my addresses. So I want to go from Redlands. Behind the scenes, it's using the ArcGIS Online geocoding service to help me find the locations, to Riverside, and I find the route for my truck. So good, I got my route. I sent this to my driver, and when they were actually driving on the route, they gave me certain feedback. They said, first, the time is very optimistic. My truck can only drive at up to 30 miles per hour because there's a governing device on the truck and they cannot drive any faster. So it actually takes more than 25 minutes. And plus, I am also routing tall trucks that need a certain clearance. In this case, the truck needed a clearance of at least 5 meters. And the route here actually was going through an underpass that did not had that kind of clearance. So if I would have actually taken that route, I would have actually crashed on that underpass. So they gave me this feedback, and now as a dispatcher, my job is to actually find a route that will meet those two constraints. So travel modes can help us achieve that. So if you are an administrator in your organization, you can go to the organization tab. Within there, go to settings. Once the settings are loaded, go to utility services. Within here, you can say configure travel modes. So by default, the routing services come with 8 predefined travel modes: driving, trucking, and walking. But you can create your own travel modes that can have your own constraints. Like in this case, I am routing a truck which is at least which requires 5 meter clearance, and I want to put a governing speed of 30 miles per hour. So I'm going to take the default trucking time travel mode, make a copy of it, and then I'm going to customize this travel mode. So I'm going to first call it tall trucks, and then I'm going to change a few things. The first thing I'm going to change is these attributes are fine for me, so I'm not going to change these. The first thing that I'm going to change is, I said I know my trucks can only go at, let's say, 40 miles per hour. So that in kilometers per hour is about 65 kilometers per hour. So I'm saying the maximum speed my truck can go is 65 or 40 miles per hour. So if the free flow speed is more than that, make sure that you're not going beyond that particular speed. As well as my truck requires a certain height clearance. So I'm going to set my height restriction. So I'm going to say use a height restriction where my truck requires at least 5 meters of clearance. So I'm going to set those two settings. Everything else is same. I'm going to save out this travel mode, save my analysis settings. Now I have created a brand new travel mode, so I'm going to go back to my map. I'm going to open my directions button again to get to the directions pane. Now in this case, if you see, I see now a new option here called trucking time tall trucks. So I'm going to just use that and find my route again. So this time the route is a different route because there was an underpass here which would have violated our constraint. So that's why I got a different route. And if you look at the time, it's actually now 34 minutes because it's taking into account the maximum vehicle speed that I have put. Just to make that point clear, if I switch back my travel mode to the trucking time, I was getting this route and it was taking 25 minutes. Now if I switch back to the other travel mode, it takes a different route and it's actually taking 35 minutes. So that's how using custom travel modes you can actually get in more constraints on your route finding. Back to you, Matt.
Okay, cool. So the next service to talk about is the close facility service. And this is when you have locations you want to travel to, maybe hospitals or ATMs, and you want to know how to get to the 3 closest one of those. You can travel to those incidents, from those incidents to the facilities or from those facilities to the incident. And that's important if it's a long thing and the direction of travel might be impacted by congestion due to rush hour, where the flow is slower in one direction than the other. You can also limit it not only to find a certain number of facilities, but also to limit this total search time or distance. So you could say, I want to find the 3 closest grocery stores to me, but don't search farther than 10 minutes because I don't really want to travel that far. Using the closest facility service in Pro, it's called closest facility from the network analysis ribbon. From the ready-to-use services, it's called find closest facilities in both ArcMap and Pro. And then from the map viewer, it's called find nearest. And all the parameters are essentially the same, where you can limit the number of things to find and the total distance out or time out to search. It also generates directions if you need the driving directions for them. The next service is called some places service area, other places the drive time. It's essentially the ability, if you have 1 or more locations and you want to see how far out you can travel within a certain amount of time, maybe how far you can walk in 5 minutes from the restaurants or the San Diego Convention Center. You can have multiple rings, as shown here. I believe this is 1, 2, 3 hour drive times from these major metropolitan areas. And once again, you can travel away from those locations or see how long, or the area for people to travel in to reach you. Maybe you're a store and you want to see all the people that can drive into you within 30 minutes. From Pro, you can use the Network Analyst ribbon. It's called Service Area. Generate service areas in the ready-to-use tools. And then with Online, there's a couple different options. It's called Create Drive Time Areas is the bread and butter one. There are other tools like Summarize Nearby or Enrich Layer that will use our service area to generate the area, but then augment that service area with other demographic data or other information that you choose. With that, another demo from Dilesh.
Thanks, Matt. So in this demo, I'm going to pretend that I work as a GIS analyst for a multinational corporation that does most of their operations in North America and Western Europe, but occasionally they are now trying to expand into India and they want to do some accessibility analysis in India. So in this case, the corporation is planning to open 3 stores in India, one in Mumbai, Hyderabad, and Bengaluru. And the Hyderabad store is already operational, the other 2 are proposed. So they want to know, and this store supplies medical equipments to the closest medical centers. So they want to figure out essentially within 15, 30, 45, and 60 minutes of driving time from these stores, how many medical centers do I have in the country? So as I said, I am an analyst. I mostly work in North America and Western Europe, so I don't really have any street data for India, but I want to do this kind of analysis. So that's where ArcGIS Online is very helpful, because we have data for the entire world. You can use ArcGIS Online for some one-off analysis that you may want to do, and for other times you can still stick to your old ways of doing the analysis or with your own data for other countries. So in this case, I'm in ArcGIS Pro. I'm signed into ArcGIS Online, essentially the same organization that I was using for the previous demonstration. Within the analysis tab, I have the network analysis button. If I click that, it shows me all the different analysis that I have. And for the network data source, it's saying your network data source is arcgis.com. That's how I know I'm connecting to ArcGIS Online to do my analysis. As compared to if I was doing this with a local network dataset, this would be the path to the dataset that was running on your disk. But in this case, I'm just using the service. I want to do service area analysis. So I'm now first creating a service area analysis layer, which is pointing to ArcGIS Online. If you look at the status messages here, it's saying it's going to ArcGIS Online for that. I have my service area analysis layer. Now I'm going to load my store locations into it. So I'm going to say, take my store locations and load them into the service area analysis layer that I just created. At this point, I want to change the cutoffs that I have. So I want to find 15, 30, 45, and 60 minutes of driving time areas around my service. So everything else is good. And at this point, I've set my analysis setting and I'm going to run my analysis. So at this point, the ArcGIS Pro is connecting to ArcGIS Online, sending all the 3 store locations that I have loaded into my analysis layer. It's uploading those locations to the ArcGIS Online service, doing the analysis in ArcGIS Online using the street data for India that is available in ArcGIS Online. Then it will get the results from ArcGIS Online, and eventually then it will draw those results on the map. Now this will give me the service area polygons. What I want, once I have got my service area polygons, is I want to do some post-processing, and then I want to figure out how many health centers are located within each of those driving time rings. So in this case, I want to know how many health centers are within 15 minutes of my Hyderabad store location, or how many health centers I have within 60 minutes of my Mumbai store location. And then I want to do a chart on the store, the drive time around the stores, and how many health centers I have. So this analysis finished. So this is my health center layer, which is essentially locations of all the health centers in the country. So I'm just going to switch that layer off. Okay, so now I have got my polygons. If I zoom into one store, so these are my 15, 30, 45, and 60 minute rings. Now I want to do this post-processing. Now for that, I wrote a geoprocessing model, which essentially takes my polygons, let me zoom this, so. Okay. So I take my polygons, take my health centers, do a spatial join so I can figure out the count of, or so I can figure out how many health centers I have within each of my polygons. And then I would do a join field. So once I get that count number, I want to join that value back to my polygons. So let me run this, run this geoprocessing model. And the processing is done. So let me close my model. I want to save my changes, and let me look at my polygons layer here, look at the attribute table. And so what that analysis did was, on each of the polygons, it gave me the count of health centers that rely on this. So now to visualize this better, I can go ahead and create a bar chart. So for the category, I want to use the name. Then I'm not aggregating here, and for the fields I want to essentially do the count, and I want to say, yeah, so this is my chart here, and saying for each of the stores how many numbers I have, and then I can do additional things with the chart view when I'm doing a presentation. So I want to only show the bars that are in the current map display extent. And then for a particular ring, if I select it, I can figure out, okay, this is my ring and this is the number. So I have a 244 health centers in this particular area. So back to you, man.
Okay, the next service is the vehicle routing problem service. And this is, like I mentioned, if you're a logistics company delivering packages, or you're a health inspector that needs to travel to a lot of restaurants and inspect it, or examples like that, where you have a lot of things you need to travel to and you may have multiple vehicles that you want to optimize all of them at once. There's a lot of properties on this. I definitely encourage you to read the docs so you can understand everything that's available. But there's things like, for each order, you can have service time, you could have time windows for when you could travel to it to deliver the packages. You could have special constraints saying that at this order, it requires someone that speaks Spanish, or this package is really heavy, so it requires a truck that has a lift gate that can lift up things. So the ability to specify capacities and constraints, overtime, time per unit cost, time per unit distance, everything that's really needed for professional logistics routing software to optimize your fleet of vehicles. There's a couple different ways you can access that. For the full power of the vehicle routing problem service, you really need to use the ready-to-use tools within either Pro or ArcMap, where you have all those parameters on all of those orders and depots and input layers where you can do those constraints. Within Online, we do have a simple version of that tool. It's called Plan Routes, and that's part of the map viewer, is the analysis. What I mean by simplified is it doesn't expose all of the constraints and properties that you might want for a more sophisticated analysis, but it's really simple and it's really easy to use for a lot of users that all they have is maybe a lot of things they need to travel to, and they have a set of vehicles that are all kind of the same, and they just want to optimize the problem based on a consistent set of vehicles where they don't necessarily have time windows or some of those more sophisticated constraints. If you wanted to run the tool, you essentially specify how many vehicles you have, how long you want to be at each one of those orders, and a couple other constraints, and you could run that and it'll optimize that for you. There's also a developer sample that's been around for a long time that uses this online service as well. It's a WPF, pretty thick client app that works on Windows that you can load up the problem and solve for a day a week and different analysis using that application as well. The source code is also available for that if you wanted to take that and modify it. But it is a couple years old and we don't currently maintain it, so buyer beware if you want to play with the code. It's there if you want it. Next service is the Origin Destination Cost Matrix service. Like I said, this is, yes?
So can I ask you a question about the routing tool and results first? If you're using a lot of traffic and that results in rerouting the vehicle, will that show because of a hazard or a weather condition or construction? Will that show up on the route map that's generated?
So I believe the question is, if you generated a route, and since traffic is available, if there's an accident, would the route around that accident and notify the user?
And could you tell that had happened?
Right, and could you tell that that happens? And the answer to that is how our online services work is it's a static analysis. So when you perform the analysis, we'll use the live traffic to know which roads to take based on the current traffic conditions. And then you can save that route layer to online and then maybe download that to Navigator, and Navigator can travel on that. But once you have that, it's static. You would have to write your own application to interrogate the traffic service to figure out when new accidents are coming in. And if there's an accident on your route, you could recompute the route to avoid that traffic, but that would be on you to write that application. That is something that we plan to expose in Navigator in future releases. So Navigator, the Esri application that does navigation, should automatically be able to pick up some of those things and try to avoid it. And that's coming in the future. Okay, back to Origin Destination Cost Matrix. It's very similar to the closest facility service where you say, I'm traveling from these things to these things, and you can limit the number of, you might want to find the 5 closest destinations within a certain cutoff. It doesn't give you gives you time and distance. It doesn't give you directions or the true shape. For some people, that's okay because they just want the time and distance. The benefit of it is it's a lot faster to run because it doesn't have to do as much work, and it's a lot cheaper if you're doing the giant matrices. It's a smaller, cheaper price point to perform the analysis, and you'll see that in the credits. To use it, it's called the Origin Destination Cost Matrix service in the network analysis layer, and it's to generate Origin Destination Cost Matrix from the ready-to-use services. Currently, there isn't a map viewer tool in the analysis platform to do the OD cost matrix. It's really just because we haven't had many requests for it. If you guys are interested in this and you have use cases for it, please just let us know. It's definitely something we can add if we think that there's a use for it. And then finally, there's the Location-Allocation service that is used for doing site selection, where you may have all your customers, or you might have census block centroids, where that might have your population, and you might want to be citing where to place new stores. Or you might be a delivery business where you have all of your customers, and you might need to place 2 or 3 warehouses that best optimize getting the packages out to other places. There's a whole bunch of different types of analysis. And are you showing a demo on this, right?
Yes.
And Dilesh is going to show a demo, so we won't go into too much details about it right now. Using it within ArcGIS Pro, it's called the Location-Allocation. In ready-to-use services, it's called Solve Location-Allocation. And then in the map viewer, it's Choose Best Facilities, just to confuse everyone. But that's the tool we'll use, and you can see in this a couple of the different types of goals for solving that problem, and I think Dilesh will talk more about that during his demo. So let's see it.
Thanks, Matt. So for this demo, I'm back in Map here, and I'm going to do a location allocation analysis. So for context, I'm working in a county health department, and for this year's flu season, my job is to locate places where my county residents can go and get their flu shots. So in previous years, people have gone to the existing health centers that I have, and they have gone there and they have taken their flu shots there. So for representing the population, I'm using the census block group points in my county, and these are all the existing health centers. But this year, I also have budget to open 4 new mobile health clinics that can also support immunizations. So in this case, I'm going to pick my existing library locations because everyone in my county is familiar with the closest library to from where they live. And I have budget to open 4 additional health centers. So I have these 8 existing health clinics. I have budget to open 4 additional health clinics. So my job as an analyst is to figure out the total 12 clinics that will be operational this year that will provide immunizations, find out which of my county residents will go to which of those clinics. So I'm going to use location allocation and choose best facilities in the map here. I'm in the map here. I've just maximized my screen so I can get more real estate. So I have all my layers. To run the choose best facilities analysis, I click on analysis. This provides me a list of all the tools. Then within find locations, I have choose best facilities. So in this case, I have now different goals that I need to pick. The first goal is to allocate to existing facilities. Now, I just don't have existing facilities. I have existing facilities plus I want to locate additional facilities. So that's why I'm not using this goal. Next goal is to minimize the travel. Now, I want to minimize the travel, but I want to cover as many residents as I want. So I'm not using this goal. The third one is the maximize coverage. This looks promising that yes, I want to maximize my coverage. So this is something that I might want to use. Next one is maximize coverage with capacity, where along with maximizing the coverage, if your facilities have a capacity constraint and your demands also have certain capacity, and you want to obey that constraint, you might want to pick that goal. In my case, I can support as many residents as I can. So I'm not using this particular goal. Finally, we have cover a percentage of demand, where instead of of locating or instead of telling the service, okay, I have budget for 4, so find me best 4, it will tell me I want to cover 90% of my population within 5 minutes. So tell me how many facilities I will actually need. So it will tell you, okay, to cover 90%, you need 5 facilities or you need 3 facilities and so on. So in my case, I want to use maximize coverage. Then I want to give certain parameters. First is the travel mode. My residents are driving to these libraries, so I leave that. Then the travel direction is demand to facility because I'm traveling from my house to the particular health clinic, so I'm giving that. Then for my demand locations layer, I'm using the block group. Then for each block group, I have a population field that determines how much population I have on that block group. The maximum travel range, I want to say that everyone or most of the time people should be within 15 minutes of a health clinic. Then in terms of required facilities, yes, I have existing locations which I need to use them. And then I want to figure out from the libraries, I have budget for 4. So I'm going to say, okay, pick me 4 plus this 8 existing that I have. Then I would say, give it a name. So I'll call it Flu Clinics for 2018. And then I'm going to run this particular analysis. So at this point, it's sending all this information to ArcGIS Online and running the analysis. While this analysis is happening, I would like to show you the other tools that we have within the analysis. So we saw under Find Locations, we had Choose Best Facilities. Then within Summarize Data, we have Summarize Nearby, where you can say from a layer, summarize the time or distance to another layer. And along with line distance, you can use all the different travel modes. And if you remembered from my first demonstration, I had created a travel mode called Trucking Time Tall Trucks because I created that in my ArcGIS Online organization that can be used throughout apps that use ArcGIS Online. So that's Summarize Nearby, and then the majority of the routing tools are within the Use Proximity. There is Create Drive Time Areas to do the service area analysis inside the map viewer, Find Nearest to do closest facility, Plan Routes to do vehicle routing problem, and then Connect Origins to Destinations. If you want to learn more about one of these tools, you can always click on the Help icon. This should give you a brief summary on what that tool is and what kind of problem it can solve. And if you want to learn more about the parameters, you can click on the individual help icons here. So we will give you a brief description of the parameters. And then if you want to find even more details, you can click on this Learn More link. This will take to your external web page where you can find additional information. So it looks like our analysis finished. So let's look at our analysis. So in this case, the green squares are the 4 candidate library locations that it picked from the 20 that I had given. So, and again, the green diamonds are the existing health clinics. So it picked all the existing health clinics and it picked me the 4 new library locations, and the red dots are the block group centroids that could not be serviced because we gave a 15-minute constraint. So they are essentially more than 15 minutes from any of the libraries that we have. And then the red squares are the libraries that it didn't pick. So zooming in, if we look at here, because our goal was to maximize the coverage, instead of picking this library or this library location, the analysis chose this one because picking this one will cover as many residents as it can within 15 minutes. So that way it has done the smarter analysis. Now my final job is to take these analysis and then make a web map out of it. So let me turn off all the other things that I don't need. In this case, I want to make sure I can give a filter where I say there is at least some demand. It says greater than 0. Okay, so now from the 20 locations that I had, these are all the existing health clinics. If I want to show the lines because it looks good on my map, I can say, so now this is the web map that I can take and put it up on my county's website where I can say, okay, take this web map and this is the link to it, and I can go ahead and tweet that link or put it on my website. So back to you, man.
All right, so quickly in summary for the services, this is a useful little chart just to show that for the type of analysis shown on top, how it's exposed and what's its name, when it's different through the map viewer, through Pro and ArcMap, and where things are and aren't available. Most of the time, things are available most places. The exceptions are, as we mentioned, the OD cost matrix isn't available through the map viewer yet. We may do that. And then also the vehicle routing problem isn't available through the ribbon in ArcGIS Pro, either for online services or for using with local network datasets as well. But you can use the geoprocessing tool to do that same capability within Pro. So the capabilities are definitely still there. Now a little bit on managing credits and how much things require in terms of credits. So every single request that you make of the network analysis services does deduct credits from your organization. This is a simple chart just for the network analysis operations, so you can understand how many credits it requires. There is a lot of documentation. There is a link here that I'm not going to go to right now, but you can once you get the slides, that brings up you to the page of all the different types of analysis and credits and storage and how you can get more and all that other things. But to quickly go through it, for a simple route where you know the sequence, it's about 25 routes per credit, whereas an optimized route, if you want us to sequence it for you, it's half a credit. The multi-vehicle route is 1 credit per route. So if you have 10 trucks that are traveling, that would essentially be 10 credits to solve that whole problem. The origin destination cost matrix was another interesting one where the number of credits is a product of the total number of origins times the total number of destinations. So if you have 10 origins and 20 destinations, that would be 200 total times 0.0005, which is actually still a pretty small number. And the other important one is the traffic doesn't require any credits as well. So if you're interested in visualizing the traffic, add that to your maps and you can see that. And then when you're routing and it's routing in weird areas, you can understand that the reason why it's routing that way is because it's avoiding that congestion and some of that those traffic areas. It's also possible to monitor the credits. This isn't specific to network analysts at all, but essentially a lot of people want to understand where credits are being used. And you're able to visualize, if you're an administrator, what services are used for the credits. And you can even monitor it by an individual. So you can see that Dilesh did 20 credits worth of location allocation, and I did a lot of vehicle routing problem. So you can really drill down and understand what people are doing. And you can also budget it, and you can allocate certain number of credits to certain users. So they can only do so much analysis before they're stopped from doing any more within your organization. And then finally, you have the ability to essentially allow users to perform network analysis or not. So if you look in the bottom right where I've highlighted network analysis, I've checked that on to say that you can perform network analysis. By default, all users have the ability to do all the types of analysis. So really it would be if you wanted to restrict access and have a user not be able to perform network analysis, you would uncheck it. But I would assume since you're in this session, you're probably more interested in people doing it than not. But that ability is available for all types of different analysis. Here's a link that just shows where you can get more help for using the services from Pro, ArcMap, Map Viewer, and developers. You can take a picture of this one if you want, but you can get these slides later. I see lots of cameras up, so I'm going to wait. Ready, set, go. Okay. Here's another slide that has all the sessions on Network Analyst. A lot of these have already happened, but not all of them. But more importantly, it's still good to have this because if you get the proceedings, I'd encourage you to look at the intro slides, the intro session and some of those others if you want to know more about the capabilities of Network Analyst. We didn't have time to really go into a lot of detail. There's a lot more information that we provide through a lot of these sessions. And then hopefully everyone has the Esri Events app on your phone. If you do, I please encourage you to provide feedback on the session and let us know how we did. All comments are good comments. Just let us know how you feel. And then finally, take a picture of this slide too. This will have the URL where you can download this entire presentation, as well as the sample data sets that Dilesh used in his demos that if you wanted to try to do the same thing yourself, you're more than welcome to. So at this point, we've got a couple minutes, so I'd like to open it up for questions. Yes, in the back.
I think we see this on desktop for generating secretaries to the district or fire district. And I was wondering, I saw on one of the slides that there's something about being able to look at truck weight and all that. Is that out? I didn't see that in the desktop version. Is that in Pro?
To do what?
To be able to like input like how heavy the truck is and how fast it can go. I saw something about that on there, but it's not in the desktop. At least I didn't see it as a parameter that I could put in. Is that in Pro?
Right, so the question is, some of the capabilities Dilesh showed where you were able to specify height, weight, length restrictions and some of those other constraints, is that just for online or is that available in Pro as well? And the answer is it's available in Pro as well. I'd be happy to show you how you can set those constraints within Pro or ArcMap or any of those places. If your data supports it, Pro will allow you to set those things. Yes?
So you've shown a good amount of routing, and so what would Navigator, I know this is not a discussion on Navigator, but I'm just wanting to know, what would Navigator give me that these tools would not?
Right, so the question is, we showed a lot of the online services to perform network analysis, and what does Navigator do that these don't, or how do they play together? Maybe a better way of asking the question or answering the question. Navigator is an application for iOS and Android at this time where you can download a mobile map package containing a transportation network for a given region. I think it's per state or per country. And on that, you can add stops just manually and navigate, just like Google Maps or Apple Maps allows you to navigate on device. What we've done is all the types of analysis that generates routes, that follow the streets and driving directions. You have the ability to save those as route layers. So you could do your fleet optimization for the day and generate routes for your 10 drivers. And there's an option at the bottom of a lot of those tools that we didn't really talk about where you can say save as route layer. And when you do that, you save those as route layers in your organization. And then the idea is Navigator, you can go as one of those users and download one of those route layers and then drive that route that got generated in the back office that was optimized based on that whole fleet of users. So the driver doesn't have to manually type in all those stops themselves. They can just download it and route on it.
Or they print it out.
Huh?
Or they print it out.
Yeah, or they can print it out. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
It's not specifically regarding the online functionality, but do you know when VRP is going to be available in ArcPro?
So the question is, when will VRP be available in ArcGIS Pro? It is available through the geoprocessing tool. There's Solve Vehicle Routing Problem geoprocessing tool that works. And then we said you can also use the online service that does the same thing. What's missing is from that analysis, Network Analyst create a network analysis layer for VRP. We don't have that one yet, and it's a silly technical reason, but right now that creates a composite layer in the table of contents that has the sublayers for your inputs. And the vehicle routing problem has tables as well. And right now there wasn't a capability to add a table as a sublayer of a layer. So it's kind of this weird thing that we need to figure out how we can get that in there. The capabilities there are other ways, but we still just need to figure out how to do the analysis layer part of it. And it's on our roadmap. I'm just not sure when that's going to happen. Any other questions? Yes?
I come from a county with a high volume of new subdivisions, new roads, that sort of thing. If we're using your data, how often would you know that I have 20 new streets? How often is it updated, or can I send it to you?
So we have the question is how often is the street data updated? So we update it 4 times a year. So with every ArcGIS Online has a release every 3 months. So this year we had a release in April, and then we had a release in June just before the user conference. And the routing services update their street data with each of the release. So the next release will be in September and then in December. So we'll be updating street data along with every release. So we do updates 4 times a year, and Esri doesn't maintain the data. We get data from a data provider here in this case. So as long as it is with here, and then we are processing that here data 4 times a year, it will show up. I would say about 3 months to 4 months lag time when it gets to here and when it comes to us. But it should come with that time. Yeah.
You run the ERP Pro, will create outliers also.
Yeah. So the question is, if you're running VRP in Pro, does it create route layers? The answer is that to that is yes. In ArcGIS Pro, we have a button on the Network Analyst for each of the analysis layer. We have a button called Share as Route Layer, which is essentially opening a geoprocessing tool. Now, as Matt was talking about for the previous question, we don't have that VRP layer in ArcGIS Pro. So how do you get that route Share as Route Layer? Is you run the Solve VRP tool in ArcGIS Pro. It has a checkbox to say save route data. That creates a zip file. Then you take that zip file as input and run it through another tool called Share as Route Layers. And then that tool will essentially go ahead, take your zip file and create route layers from it. So it's slightly different, but the capability is there. You're running 2 separate geoprocessing tools, or you can put them in a model and run it that way then.
Any other questions? All right. Well, then we're done. Have a great rest of your conference.